Welcome to the Bad Girl's Guide to Living Well. My name is Dr. Heather Dowen, and this is a companion podcast to NaturopathicMD, where you can get supplements and lab orders and have concierge appointments and telemedicine with naturopathic medical doctors wherever you are. And we like to offer this sort of functional medicine and educational format to people that are unhappy with their conventional care, or they're taking medications that just don't necessarily make them feel well, or they're tired of just covering up symptoms. And so today we have an extra special treat because you can see the blender behind me. I was just going to practice white noise for you during this podcast, but instead we're going to talk about making a smoothie for 4th of July weekend because smoothies are so good, and we'll see why. So today we're going to talk about sugar. And my dad used to call sugar white poison. And my brothers and I would look at him and be like, just start like, whatever, Dad, right? And so now it's funny that we're all like, yeah, you're right. It's absolutely white poison. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Sugar's a really complex thing because it gets metabolized in the body in several different ways. I'm talking about table sugar. And of course, as you know, when you talk about blood sugar, that's something that we talk about a lot with our diabetics and other, patients. I don't know if you've ever heard, but there's a lot of, there's a school of medicine that believes that Alzheimer's and dementia is actually type 3 diabetes. And it's the brain's inability to metabolize glucose at those high levels over long periods of time. And also sugar is one of the most inflammatory things that you can eat. It's unfortunate. It's sad. Nobody's happy about it because it's delicious and it's more addictive than cocaine and heroin. That study can be debated a little bit, but if you know anybody who stress eats, then you know that they're managing their brain chemistry and how they feel by eating. And usually that's sugar, right? Some people will eat chips or bread or, comfort foods. My comfort food was my Italian grandmother's pasta with spaghetti and meatballs. My Lord, that soothed my soul many a time. However, diabetics have absolutely no reason to eat that because it's basically poison to their system. And that's because it raises their blood sugar. With meatballs isn't so bad because you're eating the sugar with protein. And protein does stabilize how quickly sugar hits your system. But for the most part, when you eat pasta or bread or rice, those are all long chains of sugar molecules in a complex carbohydrate format. And I like to say, people are like, well, they're complex carbohydrates. Well, it's like smoking a cigarette with a longer filter. Not quite as bad, but it's still not great. So let's talk about sugar. Sugar isn't just cakes and candies and, delicious treats. It's scones and cake pops, and basically every single thing Starbucks has in their, bakery case is an amazing amount of glucose and sugar in them. So breads, pastas, rice, corn, those are really the big ones as far as where you're getting a lot of sugar in your system. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, how you can avoid it, how it's metabolized in the body, and the things that it adds to how it hurts your body. So where to start? Okay, let's talk about, we already did a digestion section where you learn about where we, how we absorb the things that we eat ideally through our digestion. And so now let's look back and review about how we absorb and digest carbohydrates, which are sugars. They're made up of sugar molecules. So complex carbohydrates are long chains of sugar molecules or glucose molecules. And they have branch points too, and that can make them take them longer to be metabolized. But if you've ever heard about like glycemic load or glycemic index, that's how fast sugar will hit your blood and raise your blood sugar. And so I'm going to use glucose interchangeably with sugar at this point, but sugar, and if you look at table sugar, is a glucose molecule and a fructose molecule. put together. And so carbohydrates like corn and rice and breads and wheat, etc., those are all like made out of long chains of glucose molecules, whereas fruit has fructose. So glucose and fructose are put together in sucrose, which is your table sugar. And then we also have some terrible, awful, evil thing called high fructose corn syrup, which the FDA allows 90% high fructose corn syrup to be labeled as just fructose. So don't buy things that say that they have fructose in them because it's probably 90% high fructose corn syrup and it's poison. Your mitochondria in your cells need glucose to make energy. Your body runs on something called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. And you can't make ATP really unless you take, or the most effective way, I should say, of making ATP is by taking a glucose molecule, putting it through your mitochondria, and then it kicks out this energy currency called ATP, which we use for everything. We use it for our muscle pumps. That's why exercising burns calories. We use it in our brain. We use it to talk, to see, to look. Every nerve contraction, everything is used. We use ATP, and glucose is the best way to make it. And so we do need to have a stabilized blood sugar in our body. Otherwise, we'll die. Then we can have brain death. We can go into a coma. Your brain uses a lot of energy. And so that's why blood sugar isn't necessarily a bad thing. However, elevated blood sugar is a really dangerous and terrible thing. So when you absorb that sugar, it goes into your blood. And when it's there, if you have high levels, it's like broken glass shooting through your blood vessels, causing damage. Now, that's why diabetics have issues where they go blind because the sugar ruins the vessels in their eyes. They have to be on dialysis because the sugar ruins the vessels in their kidneys, the really small ones. And they also have amputations because those amputations can be caused by ruining the blood vessels in the circulation that you need in order to supply your limbs. The other thing that diabetics often complain of is impotence, because the penis has really small blood vessels that bring blood to it. And so if those are damaged, then that organ isn't going to work either. And that can be a very sad thing. So we want to manage our blood sugars better. How do you do that? Well, if you eat protein with the sugar that you're eating, it doesn't let the sugar hit your system quite as fast. So that it's called stabilizing your blood sugar or slowing the rate. And that's why you want food that has fiber or protein or fat, because when you eat pure sugar, it just hits your blood system, boom, like that, and it skyrockets your blood sugar. And so it goes up, you feel really energetic, and then it drops really quickly. And that's when you fall asleep at your desk after lunch if you have pasta or a sandwich, because your blood sugar has dropped because there was nothing to stabilize it. It's like, slowly keeping the level is a much better way of dealing with it. And so that's why when you eat sugar, if you want, then it's really good to have it with protein, especially because if you have it with fat, that makes it much more likely that you're going to store fat because the fat has such high caloric intake, or it has a lot of calories. That's why nuts have so many calories, because they have a lot of fat in them. Fiber will also blunt how quickly the sugar hits your system. And so a lot of people actually don't think that juicing is a good thing to do with fruits and vegetables because it takes the fiber away and it makes it more of a sugar drink. And that's true. That's absolutely true. And that's why the recipes that I use don't have really sugary things like beets or carrots or, other fruits. I don't juice anything that's a fruit, because you're just adding a huge amount of sugar into your body without the fiber to protect how quickly it gets in there. But green juices are a fantastic thing to do. I own several different juice books, and actually not one of them has a good recipe because they all have sugary things. And sugar can help it taste better because a lot of them can be really bitter. But Like when I buy juice or when I make juice, I'll give it to my husband, and he'll say, I don't drink this for the taste or the enjoyment. I drink this because I know it's so good for me. And that's exactly right. I mean, there's some that I think you can develop a taste for because they are so vital and your body knows that it's good for you and it is delicious. And so that can be a really good thing. And we could talk about that. We'll probably do like a juicing and a smoothie full lecture or episode, because it can be fun because you're making functional food. You're making medicinal food that you can eat or drink to make your body stronger. My father had a event happen today where he had some issue with possible plaque in his arteries. And so we were talking to him about possibly making some changes in his diet so that he didn't necessarily have to go into the hospital if he had a stroke, etc., because that would be a terrible thing. And his current diet is less than optimal, even though he has, doctors for children. But that's besides the point. So I want to make this smoothie recipe later so that he can listen to it and he can remember that this is something that he should be doing for his health, because it is a medicinal food and it's delicious and it's going to be good for every single cell in his whole body. And so we'll get to that a little bit later, because first I want to talk about what high blood sugar can create in the body. So when your blood sugar goes up, there is a hormone that comes from your pancreas, and it comes from the beta cells of your pancreas, and it's called insulin. Now, insulin helps, it works like a key, and that key opens up the cells' doors so sugar can get in. And that's important because your cells need that sugar in order for them to function. And if they don't have the ability to get the sugar in, then there's going to be damage. You're not going to have ATP, and that's not what we want. And so insulin is a very good thing because it takes your blood sugar down, because it pushes the sugar into the cells by opening up the key and letting the sugar in. Now, we see something in our practice all the time called insulin resistance. And what insulin resistance is when your blood sugar has been so high for so long that the key doesn't work anymore, or there aren't as many doors to get that sugar in. And because the cells are like, look, we've been eating, bagels and donuts and pasta and bread and sandwiches and cookies for way too long. We don't need any more of the sugar to make our ATP. We've got plenty. We're just taking all of that excess and turning it into fat. Because remember, fat doesn't make you fat, sugar does. And so the best thing that you could do for your health today, if you have health concerns, if you have health problems, the best thing that you could do across the board for basically everybody who is not a marathon runner, an Olympic athlete, a pro athlete, or a growing child, is to not eat grains. Don't eat them. Don't eat grains and don't eat sugar, and just watch how your health improves. And if you have questions about that, you can look at like the ketogenic diet, where you have less than 50 grams of carbohydrates a day. It's a little bit different from the Atkins because you're doing a lot of plant-based and high like fruits and vegetable content with clean proteins. Just don't eat carbs. Everything will get better. Everything. And so why is that? Well, not only is sugar like broken glass going through your system, insulin, when you have high insulin, because the insulin just keeps going up, trying to push that sugar and saying, please listen to me, this blood sugar is poisoning us. It's causing, damage to all of our blood vessels. It's causing inflammation and possibly dementia and Alzheimer's in the brain. We've got to get these levels down. The insulin goes up. Insulin can raise blood pressure, and it can chronically, when it happens over a long period of time, create something called leptin resistance, which it's when your body doesn't recognize that it doesn't need any more food, and you can keep eating, and it is a big cause, or it's an emerging conversation about obesity. And remember, we are the most obese country on the planet. And I think it's largely because of our grain consumption as well as high fructose corn syrup. But we'll get to that in a little bit. And so We talked about the difference between simple sugars and complex carbohydrates. They're both going to raise your blood sugar, and over long periods of time, they're both going to raise your insulin. Now, insulin tells your body to store fat. You know where? Right up front in the belly. And so when you see people with like food babies or like those big bellies right up front, that's insulin resistant. 60% of Americans are insulin resistant, which means you're headed to diabetes. And if you are diabetic, type 2, now remember, I'm talking about type 2. Type 1 diabetes is a whole different animal. And so that can't be, reversed. But diabetes type 2 is a 100% reversible disease if you do what's needed, because it's a disease of lifestyle. And just because your conventional medical doctors haven't had nutritional education that supports this, and that's why they can't give nutritional advice that's worth a damn, that doesn't mean it's not a fact. And we see it all the time. I had a patient today whose hemoglobin A1C, when she came to see me on several different diabetic medications, her hemoglobin A1C was 7.1, which is not where you want to be because it's uncontrolled. After 3 months with me, it's normal at 5.5. And she's been weaning down her metformin and her cholesterol medications and her blood pressure medications because it's all tied together. These are all diseases of lifestyle, and it's about what you're putting in your mouth. And so I want you to pay attention to what you are eating, because it's either making you better and healthier or it's killing you. And yeah, that was a buzzkill, right? That sucks. So how do you get to be, someone that can still enjoy life and still, eat things that they love and not be setting themselves up for diabetes? And really, it's about moderation. It's also about making sure that you're not making stupid health choices. For example, white bread. Bleached white flour has something called alloxam in it, and it kills the beta cells in your pancreas. So not only does that white, flour, all bleached white flour has it, not only does that raise your blood sugar and make your pancreas's job harder because of the insulin that is raised, but it's also killing the cells that make the insulin. And so it's something that you should never eat. Plus, it's covered in Roundup. If it's not, organic, even if it is organic, it has Roundup. And, glyphosate is not something that your body deals with well because it's also poison. So let's give that up. And that counts for bagels and, bleached white flour, whatever that is. So even if you're baking with it, don't do it because it's harming your pancreas. It's making your pancreas's job more difficult. Like this leaf blower is making my job more difficult. You can hear it. So if someone scheduled the landscaping on a bad day, that's what I get for trying to get out ahead of the holiday. So we talked about carbohydrates. We talked about like rice, corn, wheat, all of those big things, the bottom of the food pyramid. Do you know who makes the food pyramids? Do you know who tells you that you should be eating all of those carbohydrates? Well, you'd hope to hell it was the FDA, right? Because at least they have food in their name. Well, it's not. It's the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So the guys that grow all the corn, the wheat, and the soy and the rice are like, you know what you really need to eat the most of? Corn and wheat and soy and rice. Seems like a conflict of interest to me. It has nothing to do with health. Absolutely nothing. Nobody needs that many carbohydrates. Marathon runners, maybe. Pro athletes, maybe. But I'll tell you what, if they're really paying attention to their bodies, they are not carb loading. That's 30-year-old information that if you know what you're doing, you're not. Because it just makes the body's job harder. Now, if you are an athlete, then yes, you need some carbohydrates for the, replenishing your glycogen in your muscles, etc. But I'm talking about athletes. I'm not talking about someone that's on the elliptical for an hour a day. That's not what I'm talking about. If you want to lose weight, if you want to feel better, then get rid of those carbohydrates because they're really killing us. And they're worthless. They're empty carbohydrates. They're empty calories, really. I was at a restaurant with my husband this last week, and we were deciding whether we were going. You know how I feel about cheeseburgers. So we were deciding, are we going to get a cheeseburger with a bun or lettuce wrapped? And they had the calories up, and it was 240 calories for a bun of like bleached white flour. And I was like, no, thank you. I would rather go to the movies and eat 240 calories of popcorn because it's more enjoyable. I mean, if you really think about where you're getting those calories, and they're empty. There's no bioflavonoids in those in white flour. There's no nutritional content. There's barely any fiber. And so it's just something that's making you fat. That's it. And sugar is the real problem behind a lot of, hypertension because of inflammation and insulin and damage to the arteries, and also cholesterol levels. High cholesterol is definitely associated, and especially high triglycerides in the blood, definitely associated with too much fructose and too much sugar in the blood. And so then your cholesterol goes up. And isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that if you are on a statin drug for high cholesterol, one of the side effects is diabetes? Whoops. Diabetes is a terrible disease, and it's a huge problem in this country. It's going to cost us tons of money in medical care, and it's a completely reversible disease with lifestyle, stress management, and dietary changes. We see it all the time. And so you can do it. You can lose that weight. And losing weight is way more complicated than just calories in, calories out, 100%. It's got hormones, inflammation, toxicity. There's chemicals out there that tell your body to be fat, and we pass them on to our kids. And so now we have a, epidemic of childhood obesity, and it makes perfect sense because mothers are passing these chemicals on largely from plastics, etc., to their babies. And so, it's something that needs to be looked at from a much more complex view, and that's what we do at NaturopathicMD. So if you want to have an appointment, or if you want us to look at your labs, if you want us to set up supplement regimens for you to help combat these diseases, we absolutely can do it. So you can visit naturopathicmd.com, and you can get a really in-depth assessment of your health with basic recommendations for testing. And then you can also sign up to get supplementation recommendations, etc. And we want you to do that because we're setting this up because we want to help the world be healthier and happier and more vital and enjoy their lives and not be tired and overweight and setting themselves up for heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, and dementia. That's no fun. No one wants to do that. Can't be a bad girl or a bad boy when you're dealing with these chronic diseases. And so we can be bad girls and bad boys and, eat popcorn as long as we don't eat those buns, right? And also do it in moderation. So we talked about glucose. We talked about sucrose. Let's talk about the other half of sucrose, which is fructose. Now, I am not of the school that believes that eating fruit is going to give you a fatty liver, right? But non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is a really, really significant problem in our medical system. It's when you get cirrhosis and liver damage leading to liver failure, not from alcohol, but from sugar. And largely it comes from fructose, namely high fructose corn syrup. And we see kids having fatty livers when they're young from drinking too many sodas. And we see the plaque in their arteries young from eating too much sugar. And it's crazy. I mean, that's something that should happen later on in life after having a lot of fun for a lot of years. And that gives you an idea of how much sugar these kids are eating. So stop it. Stop the insanity. Figure out something else. Give them fruit. Now, some people are like, oh, fruit, fructose, it's, too. I think it's crazy. I mean, there's so many good things in fruit that outweigh the effects of fructose on the liver. You're not going to be getting fatty liver from eating too many blueberries. I'm sorry. Now, certain really sugary fruits like, honeydew and cantaloupe, and maybe even bananas, they're so sugary that you can eat them every now and then. But as far as like blueberries and apples and peaches and all of those beautiful fruits, yeah, they have fructose in them. But as long as you eat them like in season and you eat them, with protein, have them like a cheese plate like they do, in Europe. Have one of those little beautiful charcuterie plates without the bread, of course. And make a little snap with beautiful fruits and cheeses and things that are delicious, meats. And have the fruit with a protein and make sure that you don't juice it and keep the fiber because that's going to blunt the effects of the blood sugar. No one's going to get fatty liver disease, even from eating too many bananas. I think that's crazy. I mean, I guess we can biopsy some monkeys and see if I'm right or wrong, but I don't believe it. Now, if you are a diabetic and you're on 3 different medications, you shouldn't be eating a lot of fruit at that point. I mean, that's only going to make the changes necessary to get you off of the medications more difficult. And so hopefully that makes sense. But if you're just a healthy person, maybe your blood sugars are relatively normal, you can have fruit and you don't need to worry about it. It's always good to have it with a little bit of protein, but I mean, fruit is, it's like the bioflavonoid vitamin power punches of nature. I mean, everybody wants to eat it. Women's eyes have evolved. A theory is that they have evolved to be able to see more colors. They could determine when fruit was the most ripe, more than men. Isn't that interesting? When they were hunting and gathering in the Paleolithic times. So, fruit is something that is very good for your body. It's got great bioflavonoids and things that make your body stronger, minerals, vitamins. And when I make this high fruit smoothie, then we'll talk more about that. But let's talk. So fruit is not the bad guy. Feed your kids fruit, right? Feed, your loved ones fruit. You're getting natural bioavailable vitamins. High fructose corn syrup, however, not a good plan. It's something that you should 100% never eat. It's made by Monsanto largely. It's made out of GMO corn, which means it's covered in glyphosate, which is gross. It's going to cause fatty liver disease and make you fat. So, and have high triglycerides and cholesterol and feel terrible. So why eat it? No reason. So read labels. And then again, if it says fructose, that could also be high fructose corn syrup because that's what they're allowed to do now, 90% high fructose corn syrup, which is nuts. And now what about fake sugar? Like Splenda and sucralose and NutraSweet and all those, the red, blue, the pink, blue, and yellow. When I was younger, I used to write, cancer and brain tumors and, neuropathy and stuff on those at restaurants because like people should know. Now, I'm not even going to touch on the fact that they're awful for your system. They can cause cancer, including brain tumors and neuropathies. They're toxic, super toxic. One is a sugar molecule with a chlorine attached. And we talked last time about what that does to your thyroid. You don't really want to be chlorinating your insides. So what about them? Well, let's take off all of that nerve issue and put it to the side. They cause fake sugars, artificial sugars, cause just as much weight gain, just as much of a spike in insulin, leading to all of those problems, just as much diabetes, and just as much cardiovascular disease as sugar. So there's zero reason to ever eat it ever again. Zero. None at all. Because not only are you increasing the likelihood of having nerve problems from it, but it's not making you lose weight. It can actually cause more weight gain than sugar alone. And so please throw it out. It's gross and it's poison. And I guess I should have named this podcast poison more than anything else. So great. Thanks, Dr. Dowan. What are we going to eat as far as sweet? Because we all love sweet. We have, this metabolism that loves sugar. Our bodies crave sugar. And it comes from, eons of not necessarily having enough. About 500 years ago, do you know who had diabetes? The rich, because they're the only ones that could afford sugar. That's it. And they're the only ones sitting on their asses and not working them off, too. And so it was a disease of lifestyle and it was a disease of affluence. And now the cheapest foods that we can get are the ones full of high fructose corn syrup and cheap sugar and processed food full of white flour that's all designed to give you diabetes. Now, what about fruit juice? Well, I think in moderation. I was raised on fruit juice and I've never had a problem with my blood sugar ever. And I think that, if you looked at the amount of juice I drank, it was pretty remarkable. However, if you have an issue with sugar, you shouldn't really drink it because it is very, very sugary. And like people will say, well, orange juice has all this vitamin C, and it really doesn't anymore because oranges they get picked before they have the vitamin C, and it's not as nutritious as it once was. You can get unsweetened juices that don't have medicinal values, like cranberry juice. When it's unsweetened and it's organic and you buy it in like the health food store, that's great for urinary tract infections. And so that's a nice pearl about that. But as far as other, like some dried fruits are sweetened with fruit juice because it's just concentrated sugar. But, moderation is the key, I think. So if you want to have a little, have a screwdriver or something like that every now and then, I don't think it's that big of a deal. So, well, what are our sweet alternatives? How are we going to have sweetness in our life without sugar, which is killing us and causing diabetes and cardiovascular disease and high blood pressure and, all of that? Well, I brought this today, which is sweet drops, which is stevia. Now, stevia is actually an herb that can lower blood sugar when it's in its full form. This is an extract. And this was about $12. I got it at the grocery store. And it has it's got over 1,000 servings. And really you need only this says to use 5 drops, and 5 drops is way, way, way too sweet for me. I never really go past 2. And so try it. It doesn't have a lot of the terrible aftertaste. And it's just the clear, it's got 0 calories and it's sweet. And I think they did a beautiful job. It's by Sweet Leaf. I know that you can get it on Amazon, and we do have links to it with our Amazon affiliates page where you can order it directly if you're, in the middle of nowhere and you don't necessarily have access to it, or you don't have that brand. I don't really like the Truvia so much because it's made, it's just not as pure, and it's got other stuff like malt sugars and things attached to it, which isn't a terrible thing. People ask about, well, what about xylitol and sorbitol and erythritol? Aren't those bad, those sugar alcohols? And yeah, if you eat 3 pounds of it, this might be a slight exaggeration, but it's a lot. You can't eat enough to give yourself the diarrhea that is associated with it. And it's really not that bad. So go for it. Don't make yourself crazy. There's way worse things than that you could eat. So if you do like xylitol or sorbitol or erythritol, or you get gums like that, it's actually good. Xylitol can break up biofilms in the mouth. And that's awesome because it can help with oral health significantly. So xylitol gum, I'm sure that you've seen, is beneficial for that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about fructose and high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup is metabolized. It's all fructose. It's just fructose, and it hits your liver. It's metabolized by the liver. It doesn't just get to go to your organs. It gets metabolized by your liver, and that's why it increases fat cells around your heart and your liver. In just like 10 weeks, University of California, Davis did a study about 9 years ago about this, and they found that 10 weeks of high fructose corn syrup consumption would put fat around your heart and your liver and your digestive organs, and just puts you in early stage diabetes and heart disease. So why is heart disease still killing more Americans than anything else? Well, it's probably because of sugar sodas, and they put high fructose corn syrup in everything. They put sugar in everything. So read labels. And if it says high fructose corn syrup, fructose or sugar in a processed food, don't buy it. Just don't buy it. Make your own, or say, you know what? It's not worth my life to eat that shit. It's not. And so hopefully you feel the same. And when you get off of the sugar, so sugar is super addictive. It has effects on your brain that change your neurotransmitters. And sometimes that's good, because if you have a little bit of sugar and protein before bed with something like 5-HTP, for example, it can work as a great antidepressant and help make serotonin. And it can also help with your sleep. So that's a good thing, right? I mean, it's not all a bad thing. But when it's taken above and beyond, and we have so much sugar that we eat, like milk. Milk is a great example. Jamie Oliver did a great TED talk where he took a wheelbarrow of sugar on the stage and he dumped it out. And he was like, well, that's how much sugar your kids are eating from, getting from drinking milk in their school lunches, which is amazing because if you think about it, milk is designed to take a little 80-pound calf and turn it into a 2,000-pound cow in a year. That's a lot of weight gain. So is milk really doing a body good? Probably not, but it is very sugary. And then low-fat milk is never do that, because then that just makes it more sugar, and you don't have the fat to blunt the effects of the blood sugar and as far as how fast it hits your system. So if you look, this is one of my top secret things, and I wasn't really going to break it out quite yet because I don't have my super plans put in place. But this is something called glycine powder. You can order it at naturopathicMD.com. And guess what it tastes like? Sugar. It's amazing. I mean, glycine is very close to glucose. But you know what glycine does in the body? Well, it's one of the biggest things necessary for detoxification in your liver. That's great. And it also is awesome for making neurotransmitters like GABA, which is good for anxiety. So I make myself a detox anti-anxiety lemonade, and I sweeten it with glycine, and it's pretty damn good. You have to use quite a bit of glycine, and I'm experimenting in different recipes to see how well it works as like a sugar supplement. And you can't really do it one for one, obviously, and it's not as sweet as sugar. Honestly, it's not. But if you want just like a little dusting on something like red grapefruit with a little bit of, some people put sugar on their red grapefruit. I put a little bit of glycine on it, and it still sweetens up that tart, and it's super good for your liver. See all these things that you learn? So glycine is awesome. As I said, it helps make GABA, which is very relaxing, and it's really good in the liver, and it helps make glutathione and also metabolize through toxicity. So that's my other top secret thing. But I don't know, some of you may know this, but I'm a Yankee. I grew up in upstate New York, where my dad used to make maple syrup from the trees on our property. And so maple syrup has great bioflavonoids and polyphenols and is a really good sweetener if you want to put a little bit of sweet on things. So maple syrup is great. And honey, I will have a show here soon where I'll have a friend of mine on who is a queen bee, and she's a bee fanatic, and she's very, very, she's one of my favorite people, and we'll talk bees and honey, because really, I think honey is one of the closest things to magic that we have on this planet, as far as all of the things that it can do, the research behind it, and they find 5,000-year-old honey in tombs in Egypt that you can still eat. It heals wounds in diabetic, patients that are good. I mean, it's crazy, and it's amazing, and it's a good sweetener. It helps with allergies when you get it organic. So try to get organic, raw, local honey, and that is one of the closest things to magic that you can get. And it's going to be one of those sweeteners that isn't going to kill you and make you sick and fat and die early. And so that's a plus, right? Magic or sick and fat and die early. I choose magic every time. It's interesting. When I was young, and I took my first physical chemistry class, I remember thinking, I think I was 11 or 12 at the time. I remember thinking, they just killed all the magic in the world, right? And now, looking back, 30 some odd years, no, they didn't. The world is still so magic. It just operates in a way that most of us don't even see or don't even know. And health is that way. And if you give your body what it needs, it can heal. And that's what we do at Naturopathic MD. And so let's talk about, I don't know, we talked about a lot of this stuff. Testing. Let's talk about testing. So if you are a diabetic or pre-diabetic and you don't want to go on those meds, which can make people really sick, then diabetes testing is actually pretty good. Most conventional doctors do good testing for it. They'll check your blood glucose. Usually the range runs from about 65 to 100. If you're over 100, you're high. And then if you're, under 65, you're low, which nobody wants hypoglycemia. Now, if you are optimally, I like you between about 75 and 85 fasted. If you're higher than 90, I know that you are, creeping up there and getting into insulin resistance, and you're going to have diabetic issues and high blood sugars in the future. When I worked with pro athletes, almost every single one of them, even though they were functioning at the top of their game, they were working out all the time, they often had high blood sugars, like over 90. And then we see all the time when, people retire from professional sports and then they gain a whole bunch of weight and get diabetes and can't walk around, and their pain is so bad. And I think that high blood sugar helped them get so big and put on all that muscle and do all of those phenomenal acts of sport. And yet, when you stop training as hard, that elevated blood sugar tendency puts on weight and has that inflammatory effect. And so if you have elevated blood sugars, if they're under 100, that's way easier to turn around. And a lot of it can be just done by diet and not eating like an asshole all the time. But if you're above and you're already on a diabetic medication, or if you're doing, more than one diabetic medication, like if you've graduated to insulin, then it's going to take a lot more to turn around. And so we check fasted blood glucose. And then we also check insulin because we want to see how high it is, because we can actually compare what your insulin level is and your blood sugar level and give you a really good predictor as far as how likely you are to have diabetes if you don't make changes, which is great information that I scare the shit out of people with, because then they're like, oh, I don't want diabetes. I guess I better make some changes. Here's this lab that's telling me that I'm on my way if I don't make changes. And so I like that. That helps me inspire people to make changes for their own greater good when they wouldn't necessarily make them in the first place. So I also like to look at triglycerides, obviously, because the cholesterol and the triglycerides are associated so closely with elevated sugars. And I look at LP-PLAC2, which is how much plaque you're making, and CRP high sensitivity, because if you've got broken glass going through your blood, then your blood vessels, then you're going to be causing inflammation, which leads to plaque. And plaque formation is something that can give you, when you have a vessel in your eye get occluded and you go blind transiently for a few minutes, or if that's how plaques can cause, they break off and they can cause strokes and they can cause heart attacks. And that is not what we want. And so we want to see if you're making plaque. And if you are, then we can fix it. We can turn it around. And there's some good nutraceuticals that are well researched, like olive leaf. Olive leaf is great to help just clean out the blood vessels of plaque. And what it does is it helps heal the vessel underneath so it doesn't need the plaque so much and there's not so much inflammation. And olive leaf is something that you can order at naturopathicmd.com. And if you have plaque, or if you're worried about heart disease, even if you did it for a little while, it would benefit you in the long run. So we also check hemoglobin A1C. Now, I talked about this a little bit earlier as far as like how that works and what it is and how it can come down when you make the diet and lifestyle changes and you get some good supplements that help your body work better. And so hemoglobin A1C is the hemoglobin that carries the oxygen in your blood, gets sugar attached to it when your blood sugars are too high. And that's called glycolation. And it's when it causes tissue damage, and it's not just in your hemoglobin, it's all over the body. And so by lowering that damage and allowing your body to heal, that's a great thing. So not only does sugar cause damage, but it also kind of inhibits how your body repairs. And so high blood sugars can lead to pain, they can lead to anxiety, depression, anything that inflammation can lead to. And so getting your blood sugars under control is really important. So what drugs are used by convention? Well, usually like metformin, which helps the body, it helps the keys work to open up and stuff that sugar in the cells better. Or insulin, which helps stuff the sugar in the cells better. Well, how about we just lower the blood sugar? So if you're diabetic or you're insulin resistant, you have no business eating carbohydrates. I don't care what your diabetic class says, don't eat them because it's poison. You can't handle them. You have carbohydrate toxicity. And so the great thing is if you shut that down for a little bit and you bring it into normality and reason, then that problem won't necessarily exist forever, which is the good news. And so we give supplements to help the body do that naturally and bring it about naturally. We teach how to eat so that you don't necessarily spike your blood sugars and you make changes. And now, why do 95% of diets fail? Well, it's because they never really look at the emotional effects of eating or why people eat emotionally or the toxicity or the other hormone imbalances. And so this isn't just about weight loss. Weight loss will come as a nice side effect of what we do. What are the side effects of what we do at NaturopathicMD.com? Feeling better, having more energy, sleeping better, having better sex, having a better state of mind, looking better. Now, ask your doctor if these are right for you. Oh, God. So we give you supplementation and recommendations on how to turn it around naturally. So now this is going to be the good part where I'm going to make you why, and I don't actually know what to call it. And so if you want to make comments and if you want to figure out what to call this in a good way, because I've been, coming up with different names and checking them out on Urban Dictionary just to make sure that they're not dirty and I can't come up with anything good. So what this is it's an antioxidant-based smoothie that is going to help your body repair and feel better and work more optimally. And it's a great thing to do first thing in the morning, because the first thing in the morning, if you have protein, then it's going to stabilize your blood sugar through the whole rest of the day. So I have my organic almond milk. This one actually has pea protein in it. So if you don't agree with peas, it'll just bloat you out and make you gassy. So don't drink that. Right. So put that in first. So that's almond milk. It's organic. Nuts are actually pretty low on my list of what I'm really worried about as far as getting organic or not. Forget it. So then you can add in your favorite protein powder, your choice. You can do vegan. You can do whey. Whey protein isolate is my personal favorite. I tolerate whey well, and so I don't have a problem. It doesn't make me bloated, whereas pea protein can make people really bloated, and there's pea protein in that, so that is a high protein milk. But you need to figure out what works best for you. There's great hemp proteins and pumpkin seed proteins, and there's a bunch of different options, and I'll post them on our Amazon affiliate and on our Facebook page, NaturopathicMD.com, or share them on Instagram so you can see my favorites as far as the organic, vegan or organic grass-fed whey is another great option. I love whey. It upregulates your glutathione production in your liver. It increases your growth hormone. All right. So we didn't talk a whole lot about bioflavonoids. So this is the first section. These are goji berries, and you can see how red, and I shouldn't be making this lightweight, how red and gorgeous they are. And so this is about eating your colors. We've got red, and then a nut. This is a tablespoon of turmeric. Now, or curcumin for our yellow or orange. Now, curcumin is anti-inflammatory. It's good for your liver. It's anti-cancer, anti-dementia. I'm not going to use all of it because it can be really, really strong and taste like curry and bitter. 1 tablespoon is about 300 milligrams of a standardized supplement extract. And so the more of this that you get into your body, the better, because it's just good for over 150 different enzyme systems. It's fantastic. So we've got our red, our orange. Now, one of the tricks to smoothies is, making them like milkshakes and delicious. And one of the best ways that you can make them all lovely and creamy is to add a beautiful avocado. and it'll make it creamy. It adds good fats, vitamin E, and you've got your yellow and your green bioflavonoids that, some of us need to be tricked to eat vegetables. This is how I trick my child into eating his vegetables. I've told people before that I add a handful of spinach to basically every smoothie that I make. Well, so usually I need a cleanup crew. So we'll see how this goes today on my own. So we've got red, orange, our yellow, green, and now blueberries. These are wild organic blueberries. Blueberries are really good for the blood vessels. So even though you can use them fresh, you can use them with frozen. It doesn't matter. And those blueberries, all those purple colors, all of these colors have different effects in keeping your body healthy. So the red is really good for the heart and the blood vessels. Those goji berries are the second highest content of vitamin C. They're really high in minerals. They're delicious. They're not really sweet, and they're the highest protein fruit. They grow on the slopes of the Himalayas. They're pretty tough. And so then we did the turmeric we talked about. Avocados are awesome. Spinach is high in magnesium. Now, the other thing that I want to add in is a little bit of cacao nibs. Cacao nibs are badass. So they've got high in magnesium, good calcium. They've got as much antioxidants as green tea. It's chocolate. This is why chocolate is good for you. It's just without the sugar and without the dairy. So we got the little, avocado. Now the last little bit is some coconut oil. And coconut oil is great because it adds creaminess and medium chain triglycerides. It's also antiviral, and it's got good healthy fats, and it's delicious. Now, I do also add in some chia seeds for fiber because chia seeds have good omega fats. Now, if I didn't love the taste, where did it go? In my little crazy lab here, you could add some of this into your smoothie if you wanted to give it a good orange taste, and that would also add some of your orange or your cover 3. And so I urge you to do that. Some people don't like the taste. I think they're crazy. But to each their own, right? So you could hide that in here and it would make it delicious. So let's turn this on a little bit. Oh, my ice. So if any of you remember, and my secret ingredient, because what is my favorite thing? Vitamin C. We don't get it enough. When you stress an animal, its production of vitamin C skyrockets. We don't get enough from any of our foods, so I add it to just about everything. I add a lot of it. You want to be careful because it can give you explosive diarrhea if you go too much, and I may or may not have done that in, the past. We won't talk about that. What happens if you mix all your colors in art class? Ooh, that had a nice blueberry. So you get kind of brown. All right. Now, because I love that. It's like sweet tart, like chocolate and fruity, because it's July 4th weekend. Why don't you add a little fun, being a little bit bad? So it's got a lot of protein in it, and so the protein's going to block the effects of alcohol. You can add a little glycine to it. Now let's just throw a little bit of that in there. How do you make healthy, boozy drinks? Well, hopefully you just learned. So let's run that through. Yeah, we don't get blue all over my white coat because I haven't been like I promised. So the more vitamin C you add in, the more tart it will be. And I like to, justify my drinking, icy, fruity drinks by adding some protein and some good bioflavonoids and make it a functional exploration of alcoholism. So I'm not promoting alcoholism, but you want to have a little bit of fun. That's a great way to do it. So If you have any questions or comments, what I'd really like is for you to help me name this, because it's kind of like the rainbow bright antioxidant, fun, boozy drink extravaganza, which, can't be used. So if you have any ideas of how you could call you can also add the stevia in. That would be really good. So what are you going to call it? Well, we'll see. I'll probably do a whole class or a show about delicious smoothies that you can make to get protein in that can actually help heal your body and taste delicious. And then if you want to add a little alcohol in it, on a cheat day, that wouldn't be all bad. So this is Dr. Heather Dowling. I'm glad that you joined me today for the Bad Girl's Guide to Living Well. We did a little bit of bad girl stuff, and I hope that you learned some things about blood sugar and diabetes. If you have diabetes, we can help. So go to NaturopathicMD.com. You can get one of our health assessments, and we can give you recommendations as far as how we would proceed. And we can support you through this so that you can live a better life. And we'd like to recommend or remind you to follow us on Facebook at NaturopathicMD and Instagram at the same NaturopathicMD. So this is Dr. Heather Dowling on July 4th weekend for NaturopathicMD.com and the Bad Girl's Guide to Living Well. And we'll see you next time.